specific things. Dr. Mumpower, one of the things that you have highlighted consistently in your campaign is the philosophy and the implementation of tax policy in Washington. How would you summarize your philosophy and your attitudes about taxes, where they are and where you want to see them go?
Well, we have a choice between big government or big government or big people. We only get one of those, and I'm a big people person. The more money we give government, the more it grows. The bigger the dog is, the more he wants to eat. Contrast that with my opponent who talks about being conservative with money, but really isn't. If you look at his record on earmarks, he's resisted earmark reform 100% of the time. If you look at his position on pay-go, which is pay-as-you-go, which is a good concept, if he threw what he purports to be, frankly, I don't think I would have run. But he's in a party that is dedicated to making hollow promises to people and spending other people's money, and he votes with his leadership. Nancy Pelosi 86+% of the time, and I see a major contrast between the two of us. Is I'm very consistent at being careful with other people's money. I don't believe my opponent is.
Well, if you look at our voting record, my voting record particularly, it's when it comes to the important issues, when it comes to fiscal responsibility, I place in legislation that would give reform to votes being cast in Congress, that they have to be more transparent. They have to be have 24 hours before the vote being cast. Typically in certain situations, the vote's being cast with very little time to be able to examine the piece of legislation. On the rule tip, we've been very consistent on voting against the rule when we hadn't had the time to vote, the time to read the piece of legislation. The pay-go rules, it's the first time we've been able to adopt the pay-go rules back into Congress, and it's very similar to the way we act within our own household and our own business. It's a pay-as-you-go approach to ensure that that we don't spend the money that we do not have. And I voted against the leadership when it comes to this budget. 2 budgets in a row I voted against the budget because it didn't go far enough to cut the wasteful spending and to be able to give greater tax cuts to the middle class.
May I rebut that? Mm-hmm. As a politician, we're defined not by what we call ourselves or cute titles we give ourselves. We're defined by our voting record, and my opponent does not have a consistent voting record, far from it. If you look at his record on overriding the president's vetoes on excessive spending bills, he not only has a 70 or 80 or 90% record, he's got a 100% record of doing that. It matches Nancy Pelosi 33 times. He has voted against presidential vetoes to control cost. If you look at the folks who monitor our care with people and their tax circumstance, the National Tax Limitation Committee gives my opponent a 16% ranking. The Americans for Tax Reform gave him a 15% ranking. FreedomWorks gives him a 10%. National Taxpayer Union gave him an F. My opponent is one of many, mostly Democrats, who voted to do away with the Bush tax cuts. That means in 2010, and this is before all the nonsense started recently where they really accelerated the federal deficit spending. There's a tax increase coming for every adult in western North Carolina that's going to average $1,400. He voted for that. And this is one of the things, the problems I have with my opponent. I like him personally. I don't have any personal animosity to him, but he talks one way at home, votes another in Washington, and I think that's wrong.
Well, obviously my opponent certainly doesn't have the numbers correct. We have not had but 10 overrides of the veto. And I'm very proud to stand strong for the S-chip vote that I voted to override the veto of the president to be able to provide health insurance for our children, who give them an opportunity to have primary care physician help, that they don't have to spend the times in the emergency room. They don't have to wait until they become so ill that they end up in the hospital. And I'm very proud of my votes. We've had multiple votes. When it comes to protecting our children, we had a great vote that I wish we'd had the override on our energy policy for new sustainable renewable energies. We've had multiple votes. Unfortunately, we haven't had 33 votes. And you know, when my opponent sits here and he reads us off from a list of very partisan politics, you know, Matt, I have a proven track record of being able to work across party lines to get things done. Now, my opponent also has a proven track record, of not being able to work with either party.
Chance to respond?
I'd just love to. Encourage your listeners to go to Project Vote Smart. Those are the folks that that's a nonpartisan organization, puts out the courage test, where they ask candidates to frankly share their positions on the issues. My opponent refused to participate in that, and you'll note on that site, presidential veto overrides that failed 19, presidential veto overrides that passed 14. My opponent voted on each one of those, that's 33, and he voted 100% of the time with Nancy Pelosi. And I'll make a deal with my opponent over here. Once we're all done with this, anything that I've got wrong, I'll contribute $100 to the charity of his choice. If he'll reverse that and anything I'm getting right, he'll contribute $100 to the charity of my choice. I'm very careful. Everybody gets things wrong, but I'm going to be very careful today. I'm always careful about trying to hold to the facts. The truth is, I believe my opponent believes these things. I think he's convinced himself, his handlers and others have convinced him that he's on the right course with these issues. Again, I don't see Heath as a bad guy, but when you look at his real voting record, he's an imposter.
All right, and a chance for a last rebuttal, or we'll move on to the next topic?
Well, I mean, it's going to be the same rhetoric this entire 2 hours, obviously, it seems to me. When it comes to being an independent voter, Congressional Quarterly, I was the number one freshman member to be independent voter. There was numerous accounts. We have a Congressional Quarterly. I was the fourth most independent member on either party, not just my own party, but either party. The National Journal, five most independent members of Congress. So, I mean, we can have the rhetoric by my opponent all day long. He can continue to show different partisan groups, but the fact of the matter is, I have maintained my integrity, my voting record based upon the people of this district. It's an honor to serve the people of this district, and it's certainly an honor to go to Washington to be able to cast votes as the people of this district stand beside me.
And right now, for a limited time, you will get 50% off. Call 684-4448 or go online to flypainted.com. Act now for 50% off.